All right, we are recording. So, hi, Fraser. How are you keeping?
Hey man, great, thanks. Yeah, just been like super busy, but yeah, I'm good.
Yeah. So we decided to create this recording because over the last couple of days, in fact, just from yesterday, we received quite a lot of questions about our joint release, Ephemeris, which is essentially a new approach to the proper star sign divination. But in the work, we go above and beyond how we can push that even beyond the star sign revelation by proving that we're genuinely inside the person's head and we can read their personality traits and use the fact that we know their star sign as rules that even if our reading is not exactly accurate, we could definitely nail their star sign afterwards. So it's a routine that I had quite a lot of passion building, and I'm so happy that I collaborated with you for the simple reason that I've always been performing star sign divination, date of birth divinations, for the simple reason that, in my opinion, it's one of the strongest effects that a mentalist can perform, especially for a stranger spectators, let's say, when we're at a gig, because a date of birth and star sign is something that's very personal to the spectator, but also it's not as personal as something like a pin code or some private information that may harm them morally or somehow if you reveal it. So the date of birth, in my opinion, is like um, the best information to reveal just to prove your point as a mind reader. And yes, so we can dive straight into it. And there's a few questions that we're gonna address because some people, when they read, they thought there are a lot of moving parts in the routine, but actually that's not the case. So we're here to unpack our thinking behind all of this and sort of give everybody that's interested in purchasing this project an insight of what they can expect from the work.
Yeah, so when you first sent me the manuscript, because I've been so busy, it took me a while to get to it. Um, and I remember sort of quickly reading over it, and you had said that it was based on something I'd done like many years ago now. And back then, what it's based on, I was really proud of. And it's still one of like the quickest sort of most streamlined versions of a star sign guess that I've ever done. So it was interesting that you had sort of took that and then made it your own, because there were certain things that you didn't really sit well for you, which from sort of revisiting the method, my method from the past, I realized that I could actually take out there was this redundancy in it that I could take out completely. So my version is also in the manuscript, and I'm glad you sort of like, reminded me of that method and got me to look like re-look at it, because essentially it's now the version that I've put into the manuscript is even more streamlined, and kind of the core method that it was based on, it's still there, but there's not sort of like any sort of anything that would be thought of as cumbersome that maybe performers in the past didn't necessarily like about it, or but the core idea, which I didn't realize at the time, can still go through and happen. But it took me revisiting it to realize that I could take the redundancy out of it that was in the presentation. And
Yeah, uh, yeah, exactly. So are we able to say the influence behind the routine, or should we just keep it secret?
um so it's essentially, yeah, because I mean, people with that method, like, we could probably hint at it, but what's important to know is you're going to get sort of your approach and your version,
Yeah,
as well as the up-to-date streamlined version of this core method. So it doesn't really matter that we mention it, I don't think, because once we talk about your version a little bit more, they'll sort of understand what they're actually getting
yeah,
from the product, right? But suffice to say that this is, it's like just as streamlined really as possible, like in my mind,
yeah.
it's really elegant.
Yeah, I agree with this, and I performed your original routine a lot in the past, but on a few occasions, let's say 1 out of 50 or a couple of 2 or 3 performances of probably 50 or 60 in total would happen where the spectator will be like, sorry, can you repeat that again because I wasn't keeping track, or because let's say I encounter somebody that might be perfect for this demonstration and I'll show it to them, but then they'll be the kind of person that they'll be just passively observing and listening to me. So they're not going to really follow the directions of the original premise, and they're going to ask me to repeat it. And this is that awkwardness where we're trying to avoid it as much as possible, especially in propless mentalism, because
Yeah,
uh,
yeah,
the method disappears within the script. But when the spectator says, sorry, well, I didn't hear you, or I couldn't understand what you said there.
yes, yes. So essentially, the part you're talking about has now been stripped out of both versions,
Exactly.
like including your own and my version, which is a massive improvement. I mean, in my mind, it was sort of done and it was fine, but the fact that I've now taken like how you like the first part of your routine and combined it with mine, it means that now the part that you found could potentially be problematic um, has been taken out completely. So the core method still works. It's a real bizarre thing, but this tends to happen over the years. Obviously, when I first started out trying to develop these methods, there wasn't really much to go on. And then once I found this plethora of sort of principles and interesting ways to do things, it meant that I could revisit and then apply what I'd learned to make things even more streamlined. So the idea that sort of Populus is over process, like too much process, is kind of not true anymore, because everything sort of over the last 6 to 8 years has been refined so much. Another thing I want to just quickly mention as well is, even though this is a star sign, I've used star sign divinations as like a vehicle in the past, because it's kind of a convenient, well packaged way to approach a problem, because the signs fall into specific categories or halves of the year and stuff like this. So it's kind of like, it meant that I could work out and play with a lot of different approaches and principles. So really, you sort of get in a book with principles and approaches, but you will, by the end of it, be able to definitively name a star sign in one of the quickest ways possible. And it just uses words and just flies. So yeah, I want people to sort of not just think, oh, it's another star sign, but it's kind of, it's an update on older work, but it's also got your approach and thinking, as well as principles that can be applied to other things, like you mentioned at the start of the conversation, which we can get into later. The bonus material that I teach in the booklet version, which you don't get in the PDF, is a principle that can be applied to pretty much any anagram in any language, with a little bit of thought. But I teach the basics of the principle and the concept within a star sign. So yeah, if you want to carry on.
Yeah, sure. And since we mentioned that probably people will pick up on the word anagram, so we should, I think, clarify that you're just sharing an additional concept within the book, but the core method of the main routines is not anagram based. And this was my main inspiration for it, because as I've said to some people that were interested in getting the project, I used to perform Peter Turner's Isabella Stars 3. But the main problem with this is when you're in a walk around environment and you're obsessed with star sign divinations, you still want something to land really personally within the spectator and just prove your point as a mind reader. But I wanted to not repeat constantly the anagram. Let's say there's an R in there, whatever. And when multiple spectators that already experienced the effect see me perform it on somebody else, they might say, oh, well, he's plucking out letters. It's impressive, but I can piece the puzzle in my head how he narrows down to several possibilities. So the initial goal that I had in mind is to create a process that would seemingly create the illusion of me struggling to read the spectator, but still at the end, the spectator would genuinely feel that I couldn't read or decipher what they were thinking, but I'll be already down to two, for example, two possible star signs. And then later on, when I reveal their star sign using one of our reductive processes, the spectator is really impressed because the star sign comes out of the blue.
Yeah,
Like
so,
this guy
yeah. So,
struggling
so
to read
what's
me.
really important, I think, is the fact that we're using a structured way to do this, with completely invisible compromise. Because in your version, and we're talking about sort of the main, not the booklet bonus material, but the main PDF effect, is you're using that structure, and your approach has like a beautiful ways which you can get into. Of getting information from a spectator without them ever being aware that they're giving you anything, and it's literally just two simple moments that happen within the flow of the routine. So it's real short, real nice. And then I've given an option in my version of it where you can literally ask a direct question that still seemingly couldn't possibly give you anything, and it just flows and flies past everyone in such a way, so really within about 20 to 30 seconds you're already so far ahead of everyone, and you know how you're going to reveal the star sign essentially. So I think
Yeah,
thinking of it in terms of structure and this clever interplay that was based right back in the older idea, um it means that it's a completely different approach compared to just throwing out letters and the anagram. And just while we're on anagram, the bonus material, it's a way, it's like a non-anagram, but I use the structure of anagrams. So again, my sort of approach there was to have like a readings based approach, but you don't have to give a reading, but something that feels more in line with theoretically with what a psychic entertainer might do, rather than like this clinical throwing out letters. Because for me, even though anagrams can be done really well, it still felt a little bit like a guessing game, and sort of like, oh, now he knows what letters are in it. Whereas my routine, I sort of apply like a lateral way of still using the structure to get the information, but without it looking like this sequential thing is happening. So with like one piece of information from them that makes sense within the routine, um, I'm getting the same result as an anagram essentially, but built in this, in my mind, what's more aesthetically pleasing. It just looks like I'm receiving impressions, and I just want to know which one I can dismiss essentially.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, and when we're speaking about anagrams, if you're performing for somebody that you're gonna impress them and then just walk away and they'll never see you again, the anagram is great because y I'm not gonna tip other people's methods, but what I personally use doing an anagram is Peter Turner's premise, where the star sign is seemingly framed as any kind of information, kind of like the spectator had the opportunity of thinking about anything, but for the sake of simplicity, we ask them to think of their star sign, and then we swiftly move on to sort of comparing the kind of thinker they are, whether they're more analytical thinker or whether they're better at constructing mental imagery, and then just we compare that style of thinking. And the whole guessing of the anagram is just a way of me to gain insight about their mindset. So it's not really the star sign reveal that's the focus, but the focus is me gaining more and more insight and finding better ways to read the participant. So the star sign could be literally in the mind of the spectator. It could be a country. It could be any piece of information. But we keep it nice and simple. We use the star sign for this. And yes, but the problem with this is that the actual premise and the presentation is non-repeatable. And because I am a worker and I do a good amount of gigs over the year, and I'm also looking for ways to have the same exact effect but with different methodologies, which means that if multiple people saw them guessing their, for example, star signs, they'll be able to talk to each other without them tipping the method. Let's say one of them would say, "Oh my God, he guessed all the letters in my star sign," and then piece the puzzle in his head, and he told me what the star sign is. The other person might say he was just merely holding my hand, asking me to concentrate on certain things, and then he gets my star sign. The third person might say, I wrote my star sign down, I kept everything in my pocket, I never showed it to anybody, and he still gets my star sign. So this is just a blend of methodologies that kill each other, and this is sort of burglassy thinking, because this is how burglars used to approach any kind of piece of magic or mentalism, to have methods that cancel each other in the minds of multiple spectators, so they will get the overall experience, but they'll still have no idea how I accomplished it.
Yeah, well, I mean, what I love about like how you've approached it, and then what I was able to do after I saw what you did, and then it made me rethink my approach, is that in no way does it seem like you've obtained anything, like at any point. Even though mine uses a direct question at one point, which is like a one-word answer, which just seems not like non-important. It just you've
Yeah,
just got everything, and even
I, yeah,
like even if you like you just couldn't know anything, which is it's beautiful, and like 30 seconds if you want it to be as well. But the other
yeah,
thing is, like, I think one of the most powerful things you can do is give a reading, right? And then so one of my sort of theories is or sort of like my approach is to sort of think of the propolis material as sort of ways to add in hits that bolster the general appearance of real mind reading. So by giving readings, and then having like these 30-second sort of bits, because like pretty much like the propolis now is streamlined to that degree, that you can just put these things in. So if you sometimes miss or don't always hit, it doesn't really matter, because you still have sort of other solid outcomes within a set. So it's kind of like, but it just allows you to get these hits just conversationally, and that's really always been my like drive when I'm creating stuff, and trying to sort of find this aesthetic that I've always sort of dreamt of. Sort of, I know I've got pretty much. Well, I've got really close now. It's like I can do a set, and with what I've managed to create over the years, sort of build it to a degree that feels good when I'm doing it. So that's another thing we could talk about, but I've talked about this in interviews and stuff in the past about failure and stuff like this. But the bottom line with what we teach is that this is solid, and it's not guesswork. It's and any if anyone not as familiar with with performing, and and need to practice more, well, I give options with my version that means that they can essentially, it's quite modular, so they can swap things out if however they want. But essentially what we provide in the manuscript is a solid system for guessing a star sign and always being able to nail it.
the thing about those kind of premises, especially in propolis mentalism, because nowadays we have so much tools at our disposal, is even if you ask the spectator to write something down on a billet, and we got a classical Animan way of doing things, of having everything written down, we still, and I've seen a lot of performances from prominent mentalists as well as from people that are hobbyists, they all do things that are similar. Even though the information is obtained by a peak, they would say, see it as a word, think of the first letter, jump to a very middle letter,
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
imagine
yeah.
saying it to me.
So often the pseudo presentation can
Yeah,
actually be the method, like with my stuff,
exactly.
right? Yeah,
Yeah, so this is my primary goal with this release was to create a star sign divination that was conversational, but also good enough for parlor on stage,
yeah.
because the process is real mind reading. It's literally what real mind reading should look like.
And
You and
and,
the
and
spectator.
we're not really asking anything of the
No,
spectator. Like
not at
that,
all.
we need to stress that there's barely any process, and all process is kind of it just doesn't get it just isn't really a thing. It's just a conversation. Um, the process is justified to the degree where it just flies, and everything just is just so smooth. So it's not like, oh, think of this, then think of this, then think of this. It's literally just, okay, this is the process we need to go through, and it feels completely natural, and within 20 odd seconds it's done anyway. Like, you already know where you're going,
Yeah,
before it even seems like you're doing anything. So
what I've encountered from a couple of people, they're saying, "Oh, the script is really elongated and it's not really my thing." But the thing is, I do the personality reading, which could be anywhere. The reading itself could be anywhere to 2 to 5 minutes or even more if the spectator is really communicative, really social, and they want to have a conversation with me. So I am already down to just a few possibilities and in most cases, I'm even down to one star sign, but I can keep that information secret without revealing it. So after going through the quick process, I can start reading the participant. I can have a conversation with them, or even perform a different effect. I can even ask them to write something down, or even do any other piece of mentalism. And then
Yeah,
at the end, using one of those beautiful principles first described in a piece of my mind, where um, you have an information that's so far out within the presentation that at the end it seems impossible that you actually knew it.
yeah,
So Michael is great to think that way and to realize this probably 12, 13 years ago. But from a presentational perspective, you are entirely flexible. My
yeah, yeah,
style is my style is rather psychological. So I'm not a fan of readings, but I don't frame the readings as if I'm sensing them from the spirit. I'm just telling it as a general impression that I'm getting about the participant, which creates further reason for me to get to know them in a personal level and just have a conversation with them apart from reading their mind. But if you don't want to do the reading, you can do Fraser's version, or even, you can even do my version without the reading. It's
yeah, yeah,
still a piece that you can perform under a minute and nail
yeah.
their star sign, regardless of
So,
your style of
so
performance.
right. I mean, so there's a few things there that just came into my mind as you was talking that we can get into. So like the readings thing, you don't have to perform a reading, and in fact, you know, you can. There's something I call like a cheat reading, where, but by the end of the revelation, you're essentially going to be saying, based on everything that I've been picking up from you while I've been sat with you, there's only one sign you could be. So you're going to do that. So at any point, if you just sort of pause and just or just say, okay, I'm just getting bombarded with these with impressions, right? That's all you need to do, really, because the confirmation principle, like Kenton's principle, if you get that star sign right and you've theatrically linked it to being something to do with receiving impressions, then getting that right means that you were correct about your impressions. So without ever having to say anything out loud and getting a reading accurate, you created the illusion that you were inside of their mind and you have read them correctly. So I never worry about whether, I don't want to put people off thinking, oh, you have to do it in a readings based. You don't. You can literally just perform this without a reading. Um, the other interesting thing is sort of, because you are so far ahead, you can do something else, and Pete calls this like shotgunning, where you'll perform something else and then go back. So now it doesn't feel like a larger process, but it's not very large anyway. And one of the criticisms you had was sort of like sometimes needing to throw out a sign or something, which is kind of the standard fare with other methods. Um, but really that can be eliminated, because in the past, in earlier methods, there was this problem, and I may as well address this, where because the star signs cross over 2 months each, there was always this problem with like two signs that were hanging around. But I solved that, I can't remember how many years ago. So when I first read what you was doing, I just went, oh, you can do this, by the way, and then I put that in my version. And we didn't change your version, because your version, you've approached this from like a like you're in within your performance and your aesthetic and your style. It's completely fine what you're doing. It just goes
Yeah.
past. But what we took for granted is that other people would realize that, you know, you could take this real quick solution, which is literally just adding maybe two words to the
Yeah.
script, which literally two
Yep.
pieces of information. That's it, and then that resolves that error that used to occur in these older methods. So again, it's quite modular. So there's different approaches, different styles, but we give you sort of everything so that you'll be happy with, like, okay, this is how I'm going to do it, and it's quick and it's real elegant. Yeah.
Yeah. And apart from all the Propolis methodologies that I learned from you, Ross, and Peter, and probably a little bit of Fadden Billick and Michael Murray as well,
Yep.
I haven't really studied, of course, I studied the classics, but I haven't really studied everything mentalism. So my character was, as I was building my character, because my background, my very first background, I started as a card magician, entirely only cards. So I had no experience in mentalism. So I asked myself, how can I build my character? So I went to the direct source. I went to the psychic world. So what a psychic would do, and by the way, the psychic and the tarot industry and palmistry industry is still a multi-million-dollar business industry. So people are believing in psychics and mediums, but I don't claim to have anything spiritual. But my thinking comes from the psychic world, where the sitter will sit down for a reading, and the psychic will throw Barnum statements, universal truth, general facts, names, places, stuff like that. And the sitter will only render the information that's relevant to them correct. So in other words,
Mm.
I've watched a lot of James Randi, where James Randi will be unpacking how mediums work, and he will ask the spectator, okay, for example, Stephen, you got a reading from Susan, and she claims to be a medium. How would you rate your reading experience from 1 out of 10? The person will say 9 or 10.
Mhm.
But then when James Randi unpacks all of that, and he says, but in fact, if I go over the script of Susan's, you will realize that she mentions 25 names. She mentions 15 facts. She mentions multiple letters, but you only appreciate what's actually relevant to you. And
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
this is Kenton's confirmation principle in a nutshell, basically, because once you've got several pieces of information that are deeply emotional and relevant to them, they will dismiss the rest. So in reading, at my version, it might seem that I'm throwing out a lot of star signs, or I'm doing readings at places where I shouldn't be doing them. You can completely avoid that by using your version, but also you can still do my version, but just avoid what I'm saying in
Yeah,
the script, and the
that's
method
it.
will still work
Yeah,
because it's very
yeah,
modular and flexible.
yeah. I mean, that's the thing. We taught the two alongside each other in the with the intention that people would see all of the benefits of each system. Yeah. So it's kind of yeah. So like people, it might read differently to how you perform. Like when you first performed it on me, it flew and it felt great. And then I realized where I could make it fit my style more, which is so direct and so streamlined. It's now it's fun because people can add their own presentation on top of those bare bones, which is what I always try to do. I always try to let a silent script or minimal scripting create the premise and the context, so that the structure and the process is so minimal, and then people can add
Yeah,
to that if they want to.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. We devised basically a flexible method, and to be honest with you, I rather perform the readings. But sometimes when I'm in a rush, sometimes it'll be hard to entertain 500 people on a corporate event
Yeah,
for a couple
I,
of
I
hours.
mean, I mean, I never like to be forced to do anything as well. That was the thing, like
Yeah,
certain methods,
exactly.
and so that's one reason I keep it simple, and I know that I can either insert something in or not, and it gives me that play in that room to then work the group correctly. You know.
Yeah, and also you're not required to do readings before the reveal. You can reveal the star sign, and when the usual reaction from the spectator comes as, how do you do that? You can actually say, well, I did it because I gained impressions about you.
That's it.
And then you
Yeah,
can do your reading. Then you
yeah,
can do your reading and use the bits that you already revealed the star sign. You can say, even
right.
though you believe, even though you believe that you are or you're not that kind of person,
Yeah,
the information that I gained about you told me that you could be only one possible star sign.
that's
And then
cool.
you can use the star sign as a reverse confirmation principle.
That's
So
cool. Yeah,
everything will be rendered correctly.
yeah. That's just making me think now. Like, are the more mechanical, even though this is mechanical, but it's psychomechanical and verbal. I wonder
Yeah.
if there's anything where a routine has information that you're stealing similar to this without them being
Yeah.
aware, that you
Yeah.
can then do the reverse confirmation on. That's really cool, because you're
Yeah.
essentially just getting it all for free now, like on the back end,
Yeah.
because you're going
Yeah.
backwards rather than forwards. That's cool. So
And
you're not in the blind. You're not doing it blind. That's cool. I like that.
I, I I never do anything blind. And even if in the worst case scenario, I still have a way out, a logical way out where I wouldn't look like a fool and
Yeah.
where the spectator outsmarted me. I always have frameworks to exit myself from the situation elegantly without seemingly looking like, oh, the
Yeah.
spectator catched me out.
Yeah.
So because my persona, especially when performing propless, is that this is not an exact science, and it's really not. It's not an exact science, especially with stuff like psychological forces. But this exact routine could be used as an introduction to a psychological force, regardless of the psi force's outcome, because you can use the psi force as just a way to gain insight about the person, and
Yep.
using that insight, you can make the ephemeris process even more astounding because you learn about them or about their mindset in a more profound way.
Yeah. So I don't know, have we covered everything, or that we sort of just the main questions we were getting and
Yeah,
thoughts on it? Do you think that's everything covered, or?
I trust we covered
I
most
mean,
of the things
the
that
other thing
people would be
was
visiting.
people asking for performances, but because this is like everything's literally within the scripting, that's like the brief scripting that makes it work. I think we feel like it would end up with like a trailer that's heavily edited, and you'd get the reactions and
Yeah,
stuff, but it's kind of,
yeah,
yeah, because we don't want to like give the actual words that make this work. So
yeah, exactly. Well, this is a very common trend nowadays in magic and mentalism. So we can certainly do a trailer, and I promised to myself to record a few performances because I'm
yeah,
waiting on my new camera to arrive. I can do that. There's no issue
yeah,
with that.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. I mean, yeah, we
so,
can see how it goes, but it's not necessarily something that I feel is necessary. Like if
yeah,
people like my previous work, then or trust that, even if they haven't looked at anything for a while, like there's been so much improvement and advances throughout the last 6 to 8 years. I think it's worth checking out if you want to perform a star sign in a popless conversational way that's really simple. And just as a hint, it's nothing to do with colours either, so it's not seeing signs from the past or anything like that, because that had its own problems, and it was a real early way of approaching
yeah,
stuff that. But
yeah,
now it's all moved on, and it's I only ever, you know I I appreciate like beautiful methods, and I love discovering optimizations. Like this thing that I've been playing with for recently is, I keep on updating you and going, oh, I've just had another concept that optimizes it, and then you ask, right, okay, show me. And it's like, so I always try to get it down to something that's practical, and so this idea of like loads of process just or awkwardness isn't really a thing now. Um,
yeah.
so yeah, so that's
So
really.
mhm. I think we could spend another couple of minutes unpacking some of the questions that we got.
Yeah.
The very first one that comes to my mind is some people said that they rather the numerological based approach rather than this verbal approach. Well, the thing with this is you could still go with your numerological routine and whatever the information you obtain from the numbers, you can use still ephemeris to
Yeah,
sort of make
you
that
could use
number
it.
seem irrelevant.
You could use it to create a shortcut for certain things, I imagine. Things like Isabella Star, the first, well, each iteration could be this. This gives you the star sign so quickly. You can then use the rest to get the date of birth. I prefer numerology, and I've got Obscura, which for me is like, oh, it's so cool. For date of birth. Um, because you get the star sign for free as well. So I understand that you get more that way, but every now and then you're going to want to just inject a star sign in what you're doing, and this gives you that quick, real effortless, seamless, uh, flowing way to do that in a conversational way, right?
Exactly, and you can even, let's say some people are saying, oh, but I don't remember all the star sign date ranges and all of that. Well, this is also appropriate because you can even do IS2 where you will obtain the astrological number in some way. You can even ask the spectator to tell you that, and then you can go into the full ephemeris process, and in a couple of minutes or even less reveal their star sign, and the actual star sign will help you backtrack the whole date of birth, and the whole idea of an astrological number simply disappears in the spectator's mind. So even if you prefer the numerological approach, you can still take a lot of gold from this project.
Yeah, I mean, you could use this as your core leverage, and then just with a slight, you know, like tying it somehow. It's like real back in the day. I think Ross Taylor. Hopefully, he won't mind me tipping this. If you I think it's something like, if you simply, I can't remember exactly, but essentially, once you've got like the number, there would be 3 ways to unpack it really quickly, so whether it's
Yeah,
start, middle, or end of month. So you
sure.
could apply stuff like that with this. So there's lots you can do with it. But if you really want just a solid way, and the anagram isn't for you, or like you said earlier, you want like different methods so that people remember it differently so they can talk, then this is for me, this is probably one of the best versions of a proper star sign that I've released,
Yeah,
especially with the bonus material. Like, that's pretty much how I'm going to do it always now. Is what's in the bonus material, because it's literally like one piece of script, like maybe 2 lines. You say a few impressions, they give you 1-word answer back, and then
yeah.
you're down to it. Yeah. So
Exactly. And also the method is so flexible that let's say I got a couple of comments that saying, well, how is this better than asking the spectator to write it down? Well, I'm not going to say this is not any better than asking the spectator to write any piece of information, because there's nothing better than a surefire peak. But let's say if you're a reader, and more of a reader than a mentalist, you could do your tarot readings with your tarot cards, so you can do your palm reading, but you can still incorporate the whole process into your routine, and it will look perfectly logical, because if you do palmistry, you're looking at the person's hand, and in this routine, you can still look at the spectator's hand and still reveal the information there about the stress. And because if you're really the real deal, or you claim to be the real deal, that is how it would look like. You would genuinely get impressions about the person
yeah,
and just name things about them that are concrete.
yeah. I mean, use a billet for something else within that routine.
Yeah,
Like, you can't just use a billet every time, and
yeah,
right. So these things go together, and presentationally, yeah, you could take the palm and make it look like a reading. I prefer not to do that, although you could. Or you can simply, one of the things I like to do is to just hold out either hand, and then I ask permission first, hold the hand, and that's pretty much after maybe 20 seconds of scripting, and I'm already down to 3 signs, essentially,
yeah,
at that stage in the routine. So it's like, yeah, it's just, yeah. But there's nothing else after that. You just seemingly know it. You're on the
yeah.
side. So it's really
And
cool. But sorry, just to finish, like billet
yeah,
wise,
mhm,
yeah, it's just like you can't use a bullet for everything. But theatrically, you're correct. It would look like you would be able to do a lot more in just a conversational manner. Like, that's the way it's always seemed to me. As a mind reader would just look at someone and be able to talk to them. Okay, there's nothing wrong with billets, but why not use all of this
yeah.
if there are these systems out there that have streamlined it, and it's not this Grail if it's in Denmark awkward process anymore,
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And populist mentalism has been pushed so far by every person that worked in that field, for the simple reason that we knew from the very get-go that we could create miracles just by using our words. And probably Kenton started all of this, but even beyond him, uh, people, even Kahneman experimented with some psi
Yeah.
forces,
I,
and
I mean, I mean,
people knew the potential of words.
a lot of people tried, I think, or a few. But like, the way I kind of saw it was, like, I've got a background in coding, so I suppose I kind of looked at it a little bit like that. You would end up sort of needing like if statements, or conditions, or
Yeah,
mathematics that are hidden, and logic that's hidden, and so it was like, okay, how do you then turn that into like verbal instructions? And to begin with, it was quite clunky and messy, because it didn't have like these concepts that we've uh, like developed and realized over the years. So now, like, I've taken some things and sort of just gone, okay, well, I can apply that, and then everything just becomes optimized in this beautiful way. So it's like, so it has been like a development, and I think some people from the beginning dropped out then and didn't then look at what was happening in the future, which is a
yeah,
shame, because I would almost not dismiss completely, from the previous to 8 years ago, but because me and my peers had to do that first, and some of it's still really useful and relevant, and some of the principles Michael and Pete have created, as well as like myself and Ross Taylor, they they inform what we do. So lots of useful stuff came out of there, but the execution, at least my work, wasn't necessarily optimized or as good as it could be. But I had to be quite bad at it first to develop and get to where I've got to now. So
Yeah. Well, the other thing that comes to my mind now is that somebody said, um, well, this routine is great, but it's only great when the spectator wants you to succeed, which is something that I couldn't understand. He was
no,
like, oh, at some point you have to throw some signs, but I know in Fraser's version you don't throw any signs, you still with a side sign, but this routine is good only when the spectator wants you to succeed. Well, then I'm going to counter that question with tell me a routine where you will succeed if the spectator doesn't want you to succeed. No matter
throw the
how,
deck of cards at the floor,
well, exactly. Or
like if they
no
do that.
matter how non-confrontational you are, this happens to me probably 1 out of 500 performances where somebody will be on a couple of drinks and they wouldn't be really interested in what I'm doing. They would like to just have fun and make fun of me in front of everybody. But of course, in mentalism, especially in in that kind of mentalism where we prove to be the real deal and be inside of the person's mind, those situations are quite rare because you don't paint yourself as a magician. Let's say if you do the ambitious card all night, or you do triumphs and different card tricks, or not even that, even coin magic, then people would know you're a magician. Therefore, you would hear stuff like, "Can you make my wife disappear?" or um, "Can you whatever make this disappear or transform that into the other?" And those kind of jerk, if I could use that offensive word, comments. Uh, you can encounter them, but when you paint yourself as a first as a mind reader, second of all as a person that could genuinely read a participant just by using the most profound thing we probably have, which is language, then you will encounter this really rarely. So I don't believe this statement is rather accurate because
No,
if the spectator doesn't want you to succeed, you will never succeed.
yeah, like perhaps it's how it's not being fully understood. Perhaps he was talking about they have to be on board and listening,
Mhm.
which is the case with Proclus anyway, that you discuss
Yeah.
in the book. Like, of course, you're not just going to do it to someone who's not paying attention, but the point is, with what's in the book and like the modern or up to date approaches is, and it's always been the case that you've had to get people to listen, but the bottom line is that it's so simplified now, and because when I'm creating, I'm aware of that. I know when something's going to be not easily understood or misinterpreted, so I'm really precise and accurate with my scripts. So really, that's not necessarily a fault of the method. It's, it's kind of just spectator management and making sure you've got someone that can follow along. So you might see how they get on with something else in a set.
Yeah.
So it's not really like it's not a problem with Proclus in general anymore, and it's not really a problem of this specific method, I don't think.
Yeah. And another thing before I nearly forgot about it, and let's say if you've performed star sign divinations before, you would be able to instantly read the book and go out and perform the routine. But let's say you're a person that just gets into Proclus mentalism, you've never done a star sign divination. Some people say, well, there is a memory work. The memory work, I wouldn't even call it a memory work because it's just a tiny little sequence that you can remember in 30 minutes. Even if you have bad memory, you can remember it overnight. But the thing is, at the very, very beginning, and this is something that I probably haven't shared with you, I'm not sure, I don't remember, that I used to do this effect with business cards. I would have two business cards with the zodiac, and I'll just give those cards to the spectator for them to mix them and to think of hands. And in that way, I would guess their star sign. But then I realized that this is not needed because you can still do it that way and it will be equally impressive, but you don't really need it. Just you can spend half an hour or
Yeah,
so learning a couple of sentences and then you can
yeah.
perform it entirely verbally.
For me, unless you're incapable of like storing long-term memory, you shouldn't be fucking doing it.
Yeah,
If you don't want to just learn something like this, as simple as this, um, basically, that's kind of it. That's my opinion. Because it's not
yeah,
much, and as well as that, though, like to not be so frank about it. Um, I've always advised people to do the memory work for these cribs anyway, because you want it to be instantly there and accessible, like as effortless as breathing. So that in performance, it's just there. It's, you know, that
Yeah,
this means this, and it's there. So there's no struggling. I mean, if you do struggle as you're starting to practice this and recalling things, you've got that perfect moment anyway of mind reading where you can then, as long as you remember like two things, you can then go, okay, just look at me, and that's where you can do the thinking without putting yourself under pressure. You can build these moments in.
yeah,
So yeah, I just think just learn it essentially. It's like and it's
yeah,
nothing. It's like nothing, you know.
yeah. And I have people perform propless mentalism, even if it requires some sort of memory work. They'll, for example, the thing that I'm allowed to share, because it's not a secret really, is when you're wearing a jacket, you could simply have double sided tape with a little crib here. So let's say you're doing an anagram that you can't remember for the life of you, and the spectator says
Mm.
no at the letter, so you'll be down to a couple of possibilities. You can simply say, focus on whatever you're thinking of. Let me just grab a pen and write that down, and you just simply pick, or you can
Yeah,
peek
yeah,
behind your back or whatever.
yeah.
You
I
can,
mean, you can use a crib, but for something this small,
yeah,
I think, like the thing
yeah,
I've been working on
yeah,
recently, that's like, I think if it feels like it's going to be like a masterwork, like one of my best works, based on what I've already discovered and found out. It's just like making sure I get everything out of it for like a,
yeah,
so that it's, you know, um, worthy of like writing it up as a book. Um, yeah, that might need more memory work, but for me it's going to be worth it, right? It's going to be worth it. But then there'll probably be ways I can sort of help create shortcuts, because that's another thing I'm aware of. If I can sort of make memory work easier, then I try to be clever about that. And you can use cribs, and potentially a web app with this, but I don't really want to have to go that route, because I think it's worth, like, imagine a system where you could take a few days to remember something, and as long as you're using it regularly enough, you've then got the ability to seemingly read minds in such an effortless, streamlined way that takes 20, 30 seconds to get the information. It's like, why wouldn't you want to do that, right? As long as you're capable of, you know, like forming long term and stuff like this. So I'm not having to go
yeah,
at anyone, but I think that in itself is kind of like a secret method that we should be using if we need to,
yeah,
you know.
exactly. And the rarest thing in propless mentalism, especially with the language dependent effects, is some people say, oh, I love it, but I'm in Spain and I can't perform it in Spanish. So the beautiful thing about this method is you can freely adapt it to any language you wish, as long as people in your country understand and believe to some extent in star signs, for example. But the main idea is, I wanted to perform IS3 in Bulgarian, and I was like 90% through uh, translating the process. And I had a couple of challenges which I solved. But the main problem was that the anagram in Bulgarian is slightly awkward. You need two no's to get to two star signs, which for me is it's great if you paint it the way Peter Turner paints it and the way you should paint an anagram. But
Yeah,
the thing is, you need two no's, and
it
then it
becomes
could be a little
laborious,
bit
I
more
think.
obvious.
Yeah,
Yeah, eventually it will become obvious to the
yeah,
spectators,
yeah,
no matter how,
yeah.
even if they are critical thinkers. So
So
with
this
this
gets
method,
around that problem. Yeah,
yeah, you don't need an anagram. You just need to remember a simple sequence that will take you 30 or less minutes, and
that's it.
you can go out and perform star sign divinations without anagram.
That's it. And even the bonus thing, which is the structure of an anagram, but not an anagram. Um,
Yep.
with a little bit of thought, I'm pretty sure it can be adapted to anagrams with no's, and it's not the same as what I've released in the past. Like null, it's not that. But yeah, so
Sure.
like if you do struggle to remember things, because I get that. I get that, you know, me just saying, "I'll just remember it." Some people do struggle, and I used to struggle more in the past, but for some reason, my ability to do that sort of grew and got better. I do get it. Like, you can probably use cribs, but really just try and, you know, just put the time in, and it's such at least as far as this material goes, it's such a small amount of memory work, like such a small amount. It's just knowing what belongs with something else. That's essentially it.
Yeah, yeah. And again, I said I kind of tip that thing for people that already perform star sign divination. You would already know this, so you don't need to do anything. This is more for the people that have no experience in any star sign divinations, and that's their first star sign divination that they've ever bought. So
That's it.
in that
Yeah.
case, you would need to learn a tiny little thing. But if you're already familiar with the zodiac and everything else in between, you have no
Yep.
trouble starting immediately.
That's it. So I think that kind of covers everything.
Yeah, exactly. And
Yeah.
probably something that I want to mention as a conclusion will be that we know in propless mentalism, we use a lot of verbal ploys to reduce the information that the spectator might be thinking of. And the main idea of Ephemeris was to create a star sign divination where you could spare yourself all the verbal ploys that you would use in other propless effects. So you can use them again to the same audience without tipping the met, without repeating the exact same thing over and over again, so it becomes transparent. So you have that modular routine that you can modify however you want, not use any verbal principles, and then after the spectator is impressed, you can prove a point and proceed with other propless effects that require the use of verbal
That's good.
principles.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. My approach, on the other hand, in the book is like I get there so quick, and it's just beautiful in my mind. Like using something Pete gave me in the past, and another thing of mine that's real nice to do with the written out. So yeah, there's lots in there, and like there'll be a little bit of overlap for sort of like past customers of mine, but what they need to realize is they're getting your approach and they're getting the updated version of something that I released in the past. So that, you know, if they want to carry on my journey with me, they'll be able to see these advancements and refinements. And the bonus thing hints at something that isn't the same as what's the bonus material that I've been working on recently, but that was my starting point. So it gives you a little like dip your toe in the water, but I've actually took it into realms that it's like crazy. It's like it's not even to do with anagrams anymore, really.
Yeah.
So yeah,
and
great.
yeah,
That's it.
and I'm not gonna go off any tangents, but people know in propless mentalism there are reductive processes, but in this case with Ephemeris, if you want to avoid any use of a reductive process, and I don't mention this in the book because this is more of an outside thinking, if you are familiar with Larry Becker's sneak thief, once you're down to several possibilities, you can do a really wonderful sneak thief routine where you would still reveal the zodiac of the spectator, the zodiac sign, but you wouldn't be using any reductive processes, and the routine will still reach a successful conclusion and still be really impressive. So you have to be more open about this work because it just really allows you limitless possibilities.
Great.
So
Yeah, I think we've given them
yeah,
some great tools and standalone effects as well. So yeah, I haven't really got anything else to add, I don't think.
no, I don't think I have anything to add either. But these were the main pain points that we received yesterday, and I hope with this we managed to address them, all of them at least, or at least the majority of them.
Okay, great.
All right, Fraser, it was a pleasure speaking to you.
Yeah, great. Yeah, I'll catch you really soon. Cheers.
Bye. So